be Luther. I tried to get Luther to pre-record his introduction because he's so good at it. And I wanted him to also like pause to let everyone introduce themselves and he would just do the whole thing, but I never heard back from him. So anyways, wishing Luther well. He'll be at the next one. My name's Annie Tatnan, founding member of this wonderful group and have worked in apprenticeships for quite some time at BAVAC and at JVS. And now I'm a freelancer out there supporting apprenticeships. In fact, I just was listening to the SFUSD school board meeting last night on KALW. They broadcasted it and they had a workshop on career technical education and apprenticeships was coming up, and some of the schools have the trades, and then they referenced a new tech apprenticeship that they're developing, and guess what they said? They said it's so hard to find employers. I said, I know, we all know this. We're shocking, but it was really great. I do appreciate the new superintendent. He seems very student centered, and he's giving a lot of space to both literacy and career technical education, which involves dual enrollment for kids too at City College. So, anyways, let's get started. So, why don't we just go around the room? I'll just call people, just introduce yourself and Josh too. He's new to our group, so he's kind of wondering like what brought you to apprenticeship. What are you maybe currently working on, or what are you sort of focused on, or what floats your boat in this realm? So Anita, I'm going to just start with you. I'm going to go through my screen order. So Anita Gay.
Hello, I'm Anita. I'm with BAVAC Media, and we're an arts nonprofit, but we also work with workforce. And so I've been working in the apprenticeship field for the last 5 years. I have worked with Annie, I've worked with Mindy, I've worked with several of you folks actually. And our focus is tech apprenticeships in the Bay Area, mainly. That's
Great.
it.
Anita, thank you. And Mindy, I'll go to you.
Okay. I work at Bay Area Video Coalition, now called BAVAC Media. I love workforce and have been doing it on and off for about 24 years. And with Anita and our colleague Keith Battle, we're trying to design a pre-apprenticeship program right now.
Vince Kohler, welcome.
Hey, nice to see you again, Josh. I have a privilege that no one else on this podcast has, and no one will ever get, which is that I was the inaugural podcast person on Josh's PIA.
That's right. That's right.
What was it called? Apprenticeship for All podcast.
Apprenticeship for All podcast. That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
So I had the very first slot. I feel very privileged. Nobody can take that away from me.
That's true.
And Josh and I actually do go way back when it comes to inclusive apprenticeship. So I'm especially excited to hear the latest and greatest from that. And you already know what I'm about, and the rest of the group knows that as well. Live and breathe apprenticeship, and do think it is actually the future. And everybody else is slowly catching up, but this group knows it already. So always to come to this.
Yeah.
So great to have you, Vince. Thank you. And why don't I just hear from John real quick? John, great to hear from you.
Oh, hi. I just got off an hour-and-a-half long CAI grant meeting, hoping we can get the DAS to, is there DAS here anywhere? I have a question for all of them right now. I know they're busy. I don't care.
When is
Anyway.
the funding going to be announced, John?
So they announced the funding, and if I'm good at what I'm doing here, I'll drop the award letter notification in here. The bigger issue is an email went out from Sean McCobb today that appears to indicate that the conditions being met timeline might be more accelerated than we all may have thought.
Like
Okay.
next week or something?
Yeah, not quite that quick, but I don't know. It's unclear if it needs to be done before the Board of Governors approves the funding, or after, or registration or submission. I don't know. I need clarity. So
That's for the December ones, though. Mindy, there's a new one that's going to come out in July, supposedly.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
Great. See, Josh, I told you this is what happens in this group. We share
It's
learning
good.
on funding. So great. You know, I'm going to have Sarah. It's so good to see you. We're going to just wrap up our introduction so we can get up to Josh's talk. So Sarah, hi.
Hi, I'm Sarah Holtzclaw. I'm the Director of Apprenticeship Programs at Chabot Las Positas College District. We are the LEA for about, I don't know, we have 5,500 apprentices in about 18 different occupations.
Wow.
And more coming. They're just coming out of the woodwork.
Really?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Awesome. For those of you who just joined, we're just doing a quick round of introductions, your name, where you hail from, and kind of your connection to the apprenticeship space as we welcome on our speaker, Josh. Caleb, I'm going to go to you. Hi, Caleb.
Hi, I'm Caleb. I hail from Richmond, California, and which is close to where I'm located now. And I've been doing apprenticeships up for a bunch of years, including with Josh a few years back as well. It's delightful to see you again, Josh. Looking forward.
Lovely. Thank you, Caleb. Adrian, good to see you again.
Hello, I'm Adrienne Summers, and I work for the American Association of Community Colleges. And I'm on the opposite coast, so I'm out of DC. So I'm East Coast. We are currently working with an ABA grant category 4 in the electric vehicle space, but we just finished a $20 million cooperative agreement with DOL to scale apprenticeship. We were tasked with 16,000. We finished with 22,001, involving 106 community colleges, 633 occupations.
Awesome. Congrats.
Wow.
Wow.
So I've been in the space about 5 years.
Great, Adrian, thank you. Deirdre, I'm going to go to you. Welcome. So good to see you.
Hi, everyone. I haven't been able to participate for a couple of months, but I'm so glad to see faces that I recognize and to hear from new folks. I am at the Exploratorium, and I've been working with our interns and volunteers since '95. So I feel like it's time. We need to move into the apprenticeship space. We've got such amazing tools in our shop, but we also have educators, and there are a lot of opportunities.
I know you've
Keep
been
trying.
back for a long time too, and it's just so great to have you. Our Exploratorium is one of our favorite places here in the city. So thank you. Peter, welcome aboard.
Hello, Peter Simon with High Road Alliance. There's two of us, myself and Jenny Malika, who some of you know. Our connection to apprenticeship, well, we put out now a couple of years ago, the Equitable Apprenticeship Toolkit that many of you may have seen. And lately, we've been doing a lot of work around the country with a consortium of construction unions, connecting apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship with adult ed, ESL, and GED classes. And that's been really amazing work around equity.
Thank you, Peter. Teresa, so great to see you. Hello, Teresa Wu.
Hi, everybody. I'm Teresa Wu with the Department of Rehabilitation in San Francisco, and always wanting to make sure we have apprenticeship on the table for the people we serve. So thank you all.
Thank you for your work, Teresa. April from the Bay Area Leads. Welcome. Oh, I think we'll just want to have you unmute.
I think you're on mute.
I am, sorry. April Treese with Bay Area Leads. Bay Area Leads is the project director for one of the CAI grants for in-school youth apprenticeships. We are focused on non-traditional engineering, biotech, and computer sciences. And we have yet to get a STEM employer to say yes to an in-school youth apprentice. So I'm hoping to get tips. And of course, all of our focus is on underrepresented high school communities. So thank you for letting me join in.
Beautiful, April. So glad to have you here. Thank you. And I'm so excited to see this name, Annalise, the inspiration behind this group. I was just telling Josh.
Hi, everyone. I'm also calling in from DC. My name's Annalise. I'm at Brookings Metro, and I work on lots of workforce policy things, but apprenticeship is one of my interests. And I was one of the co-founders of the group, so I always like to try to get in when I can. And I'm so inspired every time we meet by all the cool stuff happening. So I just want to say thanks for giving me hope. I'm really glad that I joined. Looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you,
Oh,
Annalise.
Annalise, I'm in DC and I just saw your background. I know exactly where you are. Goodwood.
Yeah.
World's coming together. Love it. Kenan, it is so nice to have you here. Kenan from Bitwise.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm not on camera, just working my way through Bay Area traffic. Kenneth Scott, him, VP of Bitwise Industries. We are a tech solutions company that uses apprenticeship as our main form of hiring, training those who we see have the skills and giving them opportunities to get the jobs in tech. I am so happy to see my old pal from WAMS, April Treese. Hello, hello, as well as so many of you. It is wonderful to be here.
Thank you so much, Kenan, for that warm intro. Orion, are you able to chime in? Another founding member here of this group.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just Orion Willis, City and County of San Francisco, founding member of ApprenticeSIP. Just super proud of that last point. We started this group in person meetups monthly years and years ago at this point. And on Friday, I had the privilege of actually seeing Annalise, Caleb, and Vince in person, which was pretty dang cool. And a few years ago, I had the privilege of meeting Josh Christianson in person in Santa Fe at a meeting for the Council of State Government. So it's wonderful to have us doing the Zoom, and we do plan to do some more in-person stuff later on in the year. So welcome again, Josh.
Thank you so much, Orion, for all you do. And then I see a phone number, a 203.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Sabrina Sinkansara from the Irvine Foundation. Thanks for letting me join by phone while I go to 2 different locations to pick up 2 different children, so I really appreciate it. I am just eager to be in space with you all and hear Josh, it's nice to see you again. I know we chatted a while back. Looking forward to hearing more about the work. And at Irvine, we're trying to help support the growth of inclusive apprenticeship intermediaries in the non-traditional sector. And so just appreciate being on the call today. Thanks so much.
Sabrina, that is dedication. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, great. So we got through intros, wonderful group as usual assembled. Just a couple of house rules or thoughts. We use the raise hand feature just to kind of keep track of questions in the order they come in once Josh does, his presentation. And then we use the chat to exchange ideas. I will save the chat. We're recording this. We have a YouTube channel now, thanks to Anita. And we have a lot of us today, so just be mindful of trying to keep your comments and questions brief to the point. But hopefully we'll be able to get to everyone. Anita, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Annie. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to keep this super duper brief. I think a lot of us know Josh already, are fans of his work, but Josh Christianson is the project director at the Partnership on Inclusive Apprenticeship. He's an advocate for inclusion and equity in apprenticeship and in the workplace in general. I know he came and spoke to my colleagues at Bayback Media over Zoom, and we really appreciated that. We're glad to have Josh here today. And yeah, thank you, Josh. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Anita, and all. I'm excited to be here and pleased to talk about stuff we're working on and what I know and any insight I have, but also encouraged and excited to maybe ask questions too. It wasn't too long ago that I knew nothing about apprenticeship, and Vince and worked with Caleb, knew lots. So I know there's multiple people on this call that have deeper experience in workforce itself. And I'll talk a little bit about kind of equity and inclusion, accessibility, specifically as it relates to people with disabilities and kind of the intersection of apprenticeship. But I really will probably stay short, ask some questions, and would hope to make sure that people are using this time to apprenticeship and SIP and get questions answered even if it's not my particular topic. So I'll weigh in a little bit with background. I am in Washington, D.C. currently. I'm about to go play basketball when we're done here, thus in the car in my sweats. But I have been working, the first part of my career was mostly with young people, high school and then college students, and some alumni from college working on career readiness, career opportunities, and did that for many, many years, and made a jump all in the nonprofit world, and then made a jump to consulting, and was still in the area of kind of human resources, human capital, working with kind of federal leaders on workforce issues. But for the last 8 years, I've been focused really on disability work as it relates to employment and running projects for the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. So for many years, I was the director and co-director of something called the Partnership on Employment and Accessible Technology. It goes by Pete, and it's really looking at digital accessibility. And we work to try to encourage technology makers to increase their options and functions and development of accessible tech, and mostly with employers to ensure that they were buying and using accessible technology so that a large part of our humanity could be at work and do their best effort. Through that, when we were trying to figure out, we also worked with a lot of advocacy agencies in the disability space, trying to figure out how we could get more people into technology, people with disabilities, into jobs with technology. And many folks having kind of non-traditional trajectories and backgrounds, may or may not have gone to college. And we stumbled upon this notion of apprenticeship within the IT sector. And so just kind of started talking to some folks around what their sourcing and talent sourcing was like within disability. Do they need any help being better about, you know, their processes and products, being able to recruit and retain people with disabilities? And that was really the very beginning of mine and our kind of understanding and launch into apprenticeship. That was Apprenti, which is a pretty large IT apprenticeship entity. And I'm excited to say, if I fast forward to kind of the work now, they're a partner of ours within this work, and they're going to be putting out a practice brief, because from that time, I don't know when it was, 5 or 6 years ago, when that initial conversation happened, because we were focused on the skills gap within accessible technology. So not just IT in general, but people that know accessible technology, trying to figure out that skills gap led to apprenticeship. They're going to put out a practice brief that really is about their journey. And I think it will be very informative for anybody that is interested in making their apprenticeship programs more inclusive and accessible, because they're obviously kind of a large scale intermediary, work with a lot of different employer partners, and they've made just incredible gains over the last few years in their efforts around accessibility and inclusion of people with disabilities. So look forward for that. I think it's going to come out in June, we hope. But if I go back to it, then that's kind of when I met Vince and Caleb. There was a kind of a pilot program called Apprenticeship Inclusion Models, and just kind of taking a scan of different sectors and what was happening in apprenticeship, and what was the level of inclusion of people with disabilities, what was the knowledge around accessibility. And that, fast forward, led to the project that I'm the project director of now. So Vince dropped a URL in there before with the podcast, so please do check out inclusiveapprenticeship.org. And Caleb put in Pete Works, which is an incredible resource for just kind of all things disability, but especially around digital accessibility. Lots of the resources we use from APPEA, we pull from Pete. So you've got those 2 URLs, you're in good shape. So for the last couple of years, ODEP really, with the increase of kind of attention into apprenticeship, especially outside of the trades and traditional sectors, wanted to ensure that as apprenticeship programs were growing or being developed in the high growth, high demand sectors, as they call them, that they were could be inclusive and accessible to people with disabilities. And so Department of Labor listed kind of the skills gap, high growth, high demand areas, IT, healthcare, and finance. This administration, shortly after we started, added clean energy. So those are the sectors we primarily focus on in. And ODEP only knew about as much of apprenticeship as I did, which was not very much, gleaned a little from our inclusion model, but they knew they wanted that if it was going to be a force and a tool that people use to collect talent and a great way to lead to kind of family sustaining jobs, they want to make sure that it was accessible to people with disabilities. So we jumped in and have a variety of partners, mostly intermediaries that we partner with. That ranges in how that functions because our partners are very different. So some are large and some are small. Some have been doing apprenticeship a long time, like Apprenti, for example, and some were just starting their programs. As we all know, lots of apprenticeship programs have been launched in the last couple of years. So some were just starting. Some we have partners that only have people with disabilities, and then others that weren't even thinking about disability. We came knocking on their door and said, "Oh, I saw you got a grant. You're starting an apprenticeship. Would you like to be more inclusive of people with disabilities?" So it really, the type of kind of technical assistance, for lack of a better word, the type of partnership and supports that we provide really depend on who the partner is and where they are, and kind of what they're focused on, what their needs are, especially as it relates to accessibility and inclusion of people with disabilities. And we are big fans across the board of just making, small gains and steps. I think accessibility can be daunting for people because it can be a lot if you've never thought of it. But nothing is done overnight. And so we try to work with people. What's one thing we can do to make your program a little more accessible and inclusive to people with disabilities? And so that takes many different kind of forms and fashions that we can talk about a bit later. We also do on our website, put out a lot of free and open resources to the public. We just updated one that's on there called The Value of Inclusive Apprenticeship, which I remembered. And I think it was Mindy said, people were asking about employers, because I learned pretty quickly as I was sold immediately on the pitch of apprenticeship. It's like, this is amazing. We're going to take this, everywhere and anywhere. And then pretty immediately that there is some, and if we have time later, I'd love to hear more from Vince and others, like where they see the biggest pain points. But obviously there's something that employers stop them from full-heartedly going into apprenticeship. Or some of them do it, I've worked with some large tech companies that shall remain unnamed, and they have an apprenticeship program, but it's super small. They've got a cohort of 30 people and they're, global with tens and thousands of employees. So the big trick early on, what I got here is kind of how do we encourage employers to accept more people? And so that one resource I just noted really looks at the ROI of both apprenticeship and employing people with disabilities. And it's just to pique people's interest and try to get the ball rolling because as we started working with folks, everybody wanted support and help on how to get more employer partners. But there's other resources I hope you click around and find. We put out a recent toolkit kind of on EEO and have worked on it a little bit with Donna, why am I blanking on her name? That is on the ACA that Oren knows well. Doesn't matter. Donna Lenhoff, who was at the Office of Apprenticeship, is a lawyer and wrote a lot of the equal employment opportunity regulations. So that may be useful to folks, but just click around. We're fairly new, still developing resources. We love feedback. So whether it's how to improve or something to add to resources we have, or ideas for other ones, we are always open to that. So when you click around, if you have ideas for improvements, please let us know. In addition to that, we do have conversations with our client. The last thing is just to inform policy. They are a policy shop and they work with a lot of folks internal within Department of Labor, but also in other federal agencies, thinking about how they could change policy in support of equitable and inclusive apprenticeships. And so our work out in the field with leaders and folks, we try to relay back to our client so that they can take that and have conversations within Department of Labor to inform policy. So that's DEIA in a nutshell. I'll take a moment to give a little bit about kind of the overlap and promise I see around accessibility and inclusion of people with disabilities as it relates to apprenticeship, specifically around obtaining other DEIA goals. But I'll pause there first because a fair amount of information. And thank you, Caleb and Vince for putting stuff in the chat. But just see if people have questions on what I said or additions or information to share with the group.
Sarah has her hand raised.
I have a couple questions, Josh.
Yeah.
One, at our statewide CAC meetings yesterday, both the DAS, which is the California apprenticeship, and the DOL admitted they don't track people with disabilities in apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Or it's self-reported, right? And so, and a lot of people don't report it. I don't know. There's not an I'm not looking for an answer. I'm just saying that's a stumbling block because we don't know.
Huge stumbling block. It's a huge
Yeah, we
stumbling
don't
block.
know how many people with disabilities we're actually helping.
Right. So, couple of things. Well, one, I'll just ask, why don't we venture guesses here? You can put in the chat or just shout it out. If we were to guess how many adults in the United States, no Googling, live with a disability, what percentage of adults in the US would you say have a disability? Any guesses? Anyone want to venture a guess?
It's 1 in 5.
Okay. I hear 1 in 5.
I mean, I've got
We'll
two
stop
kids.
there.
I've got
We'll
two
stop there
kids
because
with,
that's what I've got. Yeah. No, 1 in 5 is the number that I tend to use, pulled from a CDC report not too long ago. And so, 20% of working adults. If you looked at the Rapids data from the DOL around apprenticeship, I believe it's 0.12% of their apprentices have a disability. Not even possible, really, and clearly not accurate. And so there are many improvements to be made. I'm hopeful that I know there are discussions about that now, and I'm hopeful that they will be adopted before long. I can tell you a couple of the reasons that I know that doesn't work is one is, unless you have, I think it's, you got to have over like 5 apprentices, and you don't need to even fill out the volunteer form, which is around, do you have a disability? So lots of smaller apprenticeships or cohorts aren't required to fill them out. The second would be the form itself says, do you have a disability? It's yes, no, or I don't want to say. And that number that they're listing that gets into the 0.12 or whatever is the total number of people said yes out of all of the answers, not just against the no's. So I've told them they do much better if they just took the yeses and the no's, but even still, it would be low. I don't know, and I'd be interested if other people, because you have more hands-on experience running apprenticeships, I've heard that, they don't always get filled out by the apprentices themselves. It's pretty easy to check a box and say, I don't want to say. And so those two caveats I said don't explain how the number could be so low. We can get into also why some people might not self-identify, but I would be interested in others if they have kind of ideas as to why it is so very low.
I think that in my kids' case, it would be that if I am going to fill this form out and then need to get employment, I don't want an employer to know I have a disability.
Right.
So I'm going to say no, because I don't
Yeah.
want, so in fact, we were talking about it in the EEO committee or their report just yesterday and saying that there needs to be some caveat or something on the form that says this will not be shared with any, that for data purposes only, not shared with any other entity or, I mean.
Right. Yes. And they don't even, so self-identification is when someone would say they have a disability, but it's not connected to them. So, Rapids could have these numbers and know how many apprentices have disabilities, but it's not actually attributed
To any one individual, right?
To any one individual. Self-disclosure would be when someone says, I have a disability, this is what I need, etc.
Right.
And so I do think one of the things when we talk to people about how they can do a better job of creating a culture of inclusivity around disability, how they can do a better job with their intake process accommodations is definitely differentiating with any questions that are around self-identification, which is this is not attributable to you, so it wouldn't hurt your chances, and which is a big first step. I would say, though, for anyone, your children, your mother of children, or anyone, yourself, or that while there's definitely discrimination in the workplace across the board on many things, most the studies that have been taken that shown the difference between people disclosing, so fully going to their supervisor or manager and saying, I have a disability, and not show a lot of gains on the disclosure side. It's hard to know exactly what you would attribute that to. For some people, it just feels like they can be themselves. They're more engaged. They're not nervous or scared or anxious. You don't have to hide things, etc. For many, it's because they get the accommodations, whatever that is they need to be successful. But by and large, it has been shown to be a very positive experience for individuals and employees with disabilities to disclose, and that their work gets better, their contribution gets better, their sense of security, safety, well-being gets better. And so while I'm not going to pretend that there's not discrimination in the workplace, I would encourage folks to embrace disclosing, because it appears to have a very positive impact. I mean, for myself, I know I can tell you it's ironic because I worked for years at Pete and Lilampia and giving presentations around disclosure and why you should do it and how you got to get your employees to do it. But I had never disclosed myself for years and years. And we won't go into exactly why I didn't, because everybody's got their own reasons. But I can tell you, after I finally did, and I have mental health disabilities, I've had depression my whole life. But when I finally did, it was way easier because I didn't have to hide or pretend that I was sick in some other way. My team, thankful to work in a very, supportive area, would be more likely to check in with me, or if they felt like I needed to take a break. And it's made my work presence, my ability to work, to stay at work, to work through things way better than when I hid it from my team and my employers. And we could venture the reasons why, but that from the studies, that is the common experience. The disclosing is better for the individual. I'll pause
The comment
there
I
and
wanted
talk.
to make is that
Sure.
I just was speaking with Apprenti just today, and their move into California and potentially being their LEA for their program. So that's exciting that they're that active in this space.
Yeah, they're totally, I would say, a leader in kind of the disability inclusion.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So a lot of that has to do with accommodations too. That's definitely one of the reasons why people do better. One of the reasons why I do better is I know I can get time off when I need to without kind of being worried about penalized or what that means. But I would say, so when I talk about accommodations, I also want people to know a lot of employers are worried about accommodations because they're worried it'd be too costly. So I always like to dispel that myth. Lots of people probably know this, but the vast majority of accommodations cost less than $500. I think it's like close to 90% or higher, or less than $500. More than half of those are $0, are free. Many accommodations don't cost an employer anything. Many accommodations are very easy to implement. I'll put in something in the chat for anyone that has questions around accommodations. And I also think, that's one of the reasons why people get scared to go into accessibility or inclusion of people with disabilities from the employer side. And it just needs to be understood that it's usually a light lift and not that problematic. I'm going to put this URL in here while I'm thinking about it, because another program out of ODEP, my client, is the Job Accommodations Network. And so it's askjan.org. It's not really sending. Oh, it wants me to send it just to John Dunn. I want to send it to everyone. Let's see. There we go. They have a ton of resources. They'll talk to you on the phone, over the email. They'll probably send you a fax if you ask them. They will do anything to engage with you, whether you're an employer or an individual or somewhere in between. If you have questions about accommodations and any side of it, I would really encourage you to get in touch with the Job Accommodations Network. They do great work. Okay, we were talking.
Vince has his hand raised, so Vince, go ahead.
Okay.
Well, I really appreciate what you're saying. And one of the things that I learned a lot when I was on the inclusion, the inclusive apprenticeship inclusion model project was, I didn't know very much about accommodation actually, or inclusion. Well, I've always looked at inclusion from one end, but I was wondering whether you mentioned the ROI, and I was wondering whether you had found, well, first of all, anything you can say about the ROI that employers found, and also to what extent they found that as they were becoming more inclusive, that also made them better in other ways that are, that they might not have anticipated. And so that's sort of that additional effect that I certainly observed in the few models that we studied. But I was just curious what your experience had been with that.
Yeah, the value of inclusive apprenticeship that I mentioned before is a resource that definitely cites studies and where of apprenticeship alone and disability alone. So I'd encourage you to check those out, but I'll go over a few. And they're all cited. I will say we had big plans to build an ROI calculator at one point in time, but as we dug into the studies and the data, a lot of apples and oranges, or maybe like bananas and spinach comparing. It was very difficult to look at kind of strong, consistent studies. So we put all the citations on the website. Some of them are small, and are closer to anecdotal. Some are large. So, but I can give an overview kind of a variety of the benefits, both for disability, but then also, as you spoke to, on larger kind of inclusion efforts across the board. So one would be around. Well, I won't go into apprenticeship because I bet you all know a lot about that to a degree. But if we're looking at kind of thinking about disability, if I start on, I'll start on kind of the smaller concrete ends and then go to the bigger, broader picture. But the study around productivity, this was a pretty big one. It was by SHRM, so Society of Human Resource Managers, and I think it was close to 3,000 folks that they answered, and they said that 97% of them said that their employees with disabilities were as or more productive than anyone else. And that's been shown in other smaller studies too. Just productivity for people with disabilities tends to be higher in the studies that have been shown. Some around turnover and kind of reduce recruiting costs. One that we cite was a Walgreens location over a 3-year average, and the turnover rate was 48% higher for team members that did not have a disability. So people with disabilities tended to stay on the job longer, and that's reducing your kind of recruiting and retraining costs. Similar with absenteeism and error rates, a couple of studies showing that employees with disabilities had 34% fewer accidents than the rest of the population. Another one has lower error rates, fewer scheduled absences, etc. And those are all a little bit smaller case studies, but most of the studies that I've seen and heard around disability tend to show that, contrary, I think, to intuition, popular opinion, fears, whatever, that employees with disabilities tend to be a strong add to the group. As I've learned about disability, which previously my lenses, I was working with, race and ethnicity, trying to get people into jobs, working with low social income levels, some work around gender and more women in certain workforces. And I love those lenses in my professional and personal life. Disability has been an incredible way to look at and learn and think about increased kind of what individuals tend to experience in the world, and also what an organization can implement to increase and improve that experience. And all of these, even the small studies, would ring true with me, that people with disabilities would tend to bring a lot to the table, because there's a lot of problem solving that goes on just kind of in one's life. Disability is very broad. We'll talk about that in a minute, but a lot of problem solving, and so tend to do a strong job. Other notions, I mean, and these are all getting at, Vince, what you were talking about, just kind of diversity in general. Oh, wait, before I'll do that, I'll do the big study. So there was a very large study, Fortune 500 companies. It was done by Accenture and who's the other person? Accenture and someone else, put out by Disability In, which is a organization focused on disability. And thank you,
And
American Association. Yeah, and Disability In put it out. American Association of People with Disabilities and Accenture put it out. And they looked at kind of bottom line numbers. And this is for companies that score very highly on disability inclusion ratings. So Disability In has their own scale. They work with all their partners, and they rank where people are. There are other kind of metrics that rank people. So this is not saying people with disabilities do this. This is not saying if you hire them, it's just people that have a great job being inclusive do a better job. And then they showed 28% higher revenue, 200% higher net income, 30% higher profit margins. And so anytime, trying to talk to someone, an employer, and interest them and make sure that they think disability is part of those numbers are important, right? Bottom line, I'm not smart enough from a business perspective to know the difference between net income and profit margins and revenue, but all the numbers are really high and positive and demonstrate, and that's a strong study with that I think holds up, and so shows really the benefit of companies, at least that are inclusive and open and accepting. And then I think lots of probably just all the studies show that the more diverse your team or group or staff is, the better they perform. So there's lots of studies around increased innovation, and this is not specific to disability, just diversity in general. Obviously, you're dealing with a wider talent pool that allows you to pull more because people are seeing a diverse workforce. It attracts newer employees. The millennials and Gen Z have shown that they will definitely choose to go with an organization that has demonstrated a commitment to diversity over one that hasn't, if they have a choice between the two. So as far as kind of attracting employees, and then one that is kind of specific disabilities is customer base. The number of changes is large, but the amount of buying power for people with disabilities, imagine if it's 1 in 5 US adults, is huge. And then also there's a fair amount from certain sectors of the disability community of kind of allegiance and loyalty to companies, brands, etc., that they think are inclusive of people with disabilities. So lots of benefits to kind of hiring people with disabilities and creating a more diverse workforce. And I'll pause there because you all might also have additional information to add to that. Thanks for putting that study in there, Caleb. And if not, I'll say, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the chat has been blowing up. And so
Okay.
I will say at this
Yeah.
stage, there's so many links in the chat that we'd love to email that out afterwards. I have a lot of your
Sure.
emails. If you don't think I have, please pop it in chat or reach out to me directly and I'll make sure you get a copy of the transcript of the chat.
Great. Yes, and thank you for putting those in there, Caleb. Related to what your question is, Vince, one thing that I've been pitching a lot, Anita's heard and others, Mindy and Orion, but is the notion of how inclusion of people with disabilities can really help you recruit and retain other underrepresented workers. Sorry, I see the light is getting low here, but you can hear me at least. You can't see me. So some of that is just around numbers, because we talked about 1 in 5 adults having a disability. Some of it's just mathematically because the categories that the Department of Labor lists as underrepresented workers that include veterans, Black Americans, women, Indigenous folks, formerly incarcerated returning citizens, all of those groups have a higher percentage of rates of self-identification around disability than 1 in 5. For veterans, it's 1 in 3, Black Americans 1 in 4, I think women 1 in 4. I think it's 2 in 5 or 3 in 10 for returning citizens and or kind of Native Alaskan, Indigenous, other Indigenous folks. So if there are any efforts to recruit women into technology or to increase the number of Black folks in your organization, or lots of veterans hiring, or thankfully increasingly initiatives to bring in folks that were formerly locked up. If that's your focus and you're not paying attention to accessibility and disability, then you're really doing yourself a disservice. You won't be able to recruit and retain near as well if you don't have your systems and your resources and your programs and your processes set up in an accessible manner. Lots of folks don't identify or disclose, as we mentioned. And so I've been encouraging employers to think about, making your program accessible, even if you don't have a target or a goal for individuals with disabilities, is going to help with other DEIA efforts. Getting back to kind of the benefits of diversity overall. Let's see, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the new work we're doing right now and directions and some things you could look for. This last summer, we did a gathering of stakeholders, and it was focused on Black Americans with disabilities within apprenticeship. That led to a variety of contacts and kind of things to explore, and got us connected to a lot of HBCUs. And so recently we surveyed, put out a call to every HBCU in the US, have had some focus groups and conversations, and are working on a spotlight and a microsite on our webpage, which will be up soon in the next month or two. And then we'll have updates shortly after that. That's really focused on kind of HBCU and apprenticeships. And what exists, where there are issues, the questions they have, what those specific stakeholders are saying they would like to see and have when it comes to developing apprenticeships, the questions or hurdles they have. And so if any folks are interested in kind of engagement with HBCUs, please check out our website soon. We're also working on kind of a work process related to apprenticeship, and then ensuring that it's kind of inclusive. And so the work process for bringing in apprenticeship, for installing it, for the apprentice experience, my colleagues are kind of working through and working with organizations to get their best kind of what are the basic steps of doing that. And then we're going to be plugging in tips and tools for how to make sure that those different steps along the way in the work process are accessible. We should have that out, I would say, within a month or two. And then we're also finally, we thought we would do this at the very beginning, but we did not, but we were going to put out a talent sourcing tool. We've worked with some of our partners individually to help them recruit people with disabilities in specific industries and specific geographies. We're taking our lessons learned from that and the ton of good information that's already out there in the world, but trying to consolidate it in a way that will be helpful to people that should you want to focus on recruiting people with disabilities, that it will be a good tool and a good guide. Clearly, there's lots of good reasons to do it, as I gave you some markers. There's also the notion of the EEO rules and making sure that your opportunities out there to a variety of protected classes. And also just the way unemployment is. I think one pitch we make to employers all the time, not necessarily just about apprenticeship, but around disability is with unemployment low and such competition for talent, people with disabilities are underemployed. And so it's an untapped pool. And so that resource will be out definitely by the end of the summer. My hope would be in midsummer.
We have a couple folks with raised hands and we're running.
Oh, please.
Time, so I'm just gonna, we've got Annie
Yep.
and then we've got Caleb. So Annie, why don't you go?
Yeah, and I can just be super quick, just as a matter of follow-up. Would love to kind of get some of the employer voice in here, some stellar employers that you've worked with who've gone the route of setting up disability, accommodations, and just dispelling this kind of myth out there that it's expensive, costly, it wouldn't work for a small business. I just think you've raised such a critical point around kind of the employer piece. So I'm just amazed at how much you cover, Josh, and your team. It's really impressive. Thank you.
And Caleb, why don't you go ahead?
I just wanted to make sure I heard right, because Josh, you were saying work process, and of course my head went to work process schedule. And were you saying you were working on developing like guidance for building accessible work process schedules and developing apprenticeship programs? Because that would be awesome.
Yes, I was afraid someone was going to ask me this great specific question, but maybe it can be saved because I don't know if Orion is still on or busy with his kids, but he's one of the folks.
I'm still listening.
So Orion, can you tell the people what the heck, because my team is developing around that notion of work processes, a work process schedule, but from what you've gleaned kind of from talking with Sadie, do you have an idea of an ability to answer Caleb's question as to what it might entail? It's okay if you don't. I just don't know exactly either. So reaching here.
I guess the idea of using like universal design tools, accessible technologies, just all of the different resources that you've been able to kind of aggregate and work on designing over the years that might be able to be embedded into a work process schedule, I think would help us really make the case that universally we should add all of that to work process schedules where they make sense. And it really kind of goes, like when I was thinking about it, it was inspired by your whole Curb Cut 3.0 idea, which is if we create, onboarding mechanisms and cultures that are supportive of everyone, it's gonna benefit people with or without disabilities, people from every single background. But that's what I was thinking. It's like those tools that we might see show up in a work process schedule.
Yes, and I do think it's related to the work process schedule, Caleb. One of our teammates has a background in apprenticeship. It was kind of her idea. She's been working with two other people on team, and I've been seeing it on the track and like, sounds good. I know a couple of our partners want it, but I don't know exactly what it is. But I'm almost certain it has to do with the work process schedule as it relates to apprenticeship. But I can also follow up with you, Caleb, and give you insight.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'd also love to chat about this over, lunch or something like that with Orion one of these days. Since we were talking about that last week. This sounds like there's at least two like really valuable points of contact here. One is certainly, of course, like building in using accessible processes, universal design for learning, and when sponsors are thinking about putting together work process schedules, like actually doing a really thoughtful universal design process when they're building those schedules, but also like a step back from that, having a system so when people go in and actually set up their work process schedules, they're using a platform that is by default directing them to use those materials. And it sounds like you're doing the latter, or at least that's the idea of it, which is absolutely something that should be like just integrated into OA in general, as well as maybe some of the other tools that like WorkHands are building right now. So anyway, very cool.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Last minute thoughts from anyone? I just interrupted somebody.
I can't believe I ate up all that time. I was hoping I was going to get to ask questions and learn from you all, and I don't know how good of a job I did covering our materials, but please, share my information with anyone when you send out the email. I'd be happy to follow up on things you heard or things we didn't get to.
Yeah, I think we need a part 2. Anita, thank you so much for bringing Josh to the group. This was Anita's inspiration, and Josh, we just can't thank you enough for joining us from a different time zone, for all the work you do, for bringing yourself to this work, and talking about your own situations, and it's just really inspiring. Really inspiring.
Awesome. Well, I think it's a group of people that are about inclusion and equity, and I can just honestly say learning about disability is an incredible lens to add, and I think makes people better at any work as it relates to trying to make an equitable workforce, because at its core is just about what do human beings need so that they can do their best and succeed and be open. And so I've enjoyed learning about it and encourage people to learn more and more as well.
Amen.
So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Josh. And for all who didn't see in the chat, our next meeting is May 24th. You will absolutely hear from me before then, but just bookmark that in your brains. And join our meetup group if you can. Link is in the chat. Thanks, Adrienne. I will be reaching out to you all with a transcript of the chat after this call. Thank you so much. And
awesome.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening. Enjoy your game, Josh.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Yeah, Josh, it looks pretty dark there.
I know it's time. But good to see you, Vince and Caleb and other folks. And I just chatted, but please include me on next ApprenticeSIPs.
Yes, we'll do. All right.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.